Okay, thanks for watching. In this lesson, we're going to talk about how to evaluate arguments effectively by using the three appeals of argument. So let's take a look at the objectives. We have three for this lesson. First, we're going to understand Aristotle's three major appeals of arguments. Second, you're going to be able to identify each appeal and how they operate. And lastly, we're going to look at some advertisements at the end of this video lesson to see how the appeals work, and that'll be a lot of fun. So let's jump into it. So the famous Greek philosopher Aristotle, who is basically the best philosopher that ever lived, who was alive around 400 BC, that's right, 2,500 years ago, said arguments convince people by using three appeals, and we still look at these appeals today. Here he is, the man himself. Arguments convince people to believe in them logically, right, or what he called logos, by having a clear thesis, enough support, and strong evidence. So these are sort of logical basis for convince somebody to believe something. Nice thesis, good support, strong evidence, all the things that we talked about with Essay 1. Arguments also can convince people emotionally, though, or what he called pathos. So an argument can stir our emotions and make us angry or sad, especially, and we see this a lot in debates when candidates get sort of heated, and that emotion kind of rubs off on us, and it can definitely make us angry or impassioned or sad. So whenever an author is stirring our emotions, they're appealing to us emotionally, and it really doesn't have anything to do with logic. Finally, and probably most convincingly, an argument can appeals to us ethically, or has what Aristotle calls ethos, which is credibility, essentially. So if an author can prove to us that he or she is extremely credible, we're pretty much likely to believe whatever he or she has to say. So a good argument tries to find a balance between the three appeals. You want to use all three, right? An argument that's just logic might seem stale and devoid of emotion. But you also need to make sure that you're coming across as credible. So you want to sort of find all three and have a balance, and that's where you get a good, strong argument. So let's take a closer look at each of these three appeals. So the first appeal is logic, or what Aristotle called logos. When we examine logic, we wonder how effectively an argument appeals to our mind or rationality. We're like Dr. Spock. We don't have emotions. It's only logical. That's all we're interested in. When examining an argument's logos, we ask, what's the author's thesis? What's he or she trying to prove to us? Is there enough support to prove that thesis? Right? Does the author give us enough reasons, like we talked about with Essay 1? And is the support backed with strong evidence? Does the author convince us of those reasons by using statistics, facts, strong evidence? So logic is probably the most important appeal of written arguments. That's what people are primarily going to be focusing on, and that's what you should primarily look at is, does there a strong thesis? Is there enough reasons? Is there enough support? The second appeal is the emotional appeal, pathos. So an emotional appeal is really anything but logical, like I mentioned before. It's all about stirring feelings or stirring emotions. When we look for an emotional appeal, we ask, how does the argument affect my emotions? Does the author use any strategies to make me feel angry, sad, shocked, disgusted, or joyful? Right? Is the author trying to make us feel one of these ways, or does something that the author do make us feel one of these ways? Although an emotional appeal has little to do with the mind and everything to do with the heart, it can still be very convincing, right? People are emotional beings, right? And when somebody has a very strong, impassioned tone, that sort of rubs off on us. When somebody tells us a really somber, sad story, that makes us sad. So the emotional appeal can be very convincing as well, as we'll see in just a little bit. So the last appeal is perhaps the most subtle, but also one of the most convincing. That's the ethical appeal, or what Aristotle called ethos, or having ethos. So an argument convinces us ethically, or we see the author as having ethos, when we see him or her as trustworthy. ethical and credible. So to evaluate an ethical appeal, we ask, do I see the author as trustworthy or believable? Is the author some kind of an expert in the thing that he or she is writing about? Or is the author somehow qualified to make the argument that he or she is making? Does the author seem unbiased? Right? Is he or she relatively impartial, like a judge? Or does he or she have a very strong stake in the argument and seem biased? These right here are your Supreme Court justices, perhaps the most impartial, or hopefully the most impartial people in the country. And when Ruth Bader Ginsburg says something, you can pretty much believe it because she has a lot of ethos, a lot of credibility. She's been on the Supreme Court for a long time. When she talks, people listen. She doesn't necessarily need logic or evidence to prove her points, although she often uses that. Just by saying something, she carries a certain weight or a certain ethos. All of the justices do. So arguments appeal to us ethically when they make us believe in the author, or when an author does things that make us see him or her as trustworthy, builds up our trust. So there are the three appeals of argument. Let's practice looking at some, and a good place to practice looking is to look at some arguments that we see every day in advertisements. Really good places to recognize these appeals. So let's look at a few ads. Here's one for Abercrombie & Fitch, and this is making an argument. All advertisements are making an argument. So the goal of this argument is to get us to buy Abercrombie & Fitch clothes. So we'd ask, how is this ad trying to make us buy Abercrombie & Fitch clothes, or convincing us to buy Abercrombie & Fitch clothes? Is it convincing us logically? I don't think so. It's not really telling us that Abercrombie & Fitch are a good brand of clothes, that they hold up, that they're high quality. This guy's not even wearing clothes. So it looks like the logical appeal is out here. Is it convincing us ethically, or does this give ethos? Depends on how you see this man. If you admire this man in some way, maybe that does lend ethos to Abercrombie & Fitch. If you see that person as being similar to you, that might help you to want to buy Abercrombie & Fitch clothes. So it could have ethos for the right viewer. But the way this is really convincing us to buy Abercrombie & Fitch clothes is emotionally. When we look at this ad, we have an emotional reaction, right? He's an attractive man. He's not wearing a shirt. There's also a flag in the background, which is patriotic. So that kind of maybe stirs our feelings as an American. It makes us feel like we want to be on this yacht with this guy, and it makes us happy, right? So emotional appeal is primarily what they're using. And that's what most advertisements rely on. You hear that phrase, sex sells. That's talking about emotional appeals in advertisement. So let's move on to another one. Trigger warning. This one is kind of gross, but it's sort of the point. Yeah, that's pretty gross. The advertisement's telling us smoking can cause a slow and painful death, and there's this man who's obviously has some kind of a tumor on his neck that's you don't even want to look at. So without thinking too much about this, we obviously know that this is an emotional appeal. Right? It's clearly making us sort of disgusted and stirring our emotions and making us not want to smoke cigarettes. And it's pretty convincing too. It also has a bit of a logical appeal because this is a logical approach. It's saying smoking can cause a slow, painful death. There's a logical reason not to smoke. So we have the emotion and the logical here. Ethos isn't so much in here because we don't really know who's telling us this. We don't know where it's coming from. If we knew where it was coming from, maybe this ad would have some ethos to it. So that's primarily the emotional appeal. Let's take a look at a couple others. Here's one for a Subaru, right? The Subaru Outback Motor Trend's 2010 Sport Utility of the Year. So right here, we're actually getting a statement that this car has won an award. It's a high quality car according to Motor Trend. So that right there is the logical appeal. It's giving us a logical reason to buy the Subaru. this company has concluded that it's a good car. So there's logic. So if we're making a decision based on logic, then we would say, yes, this is a good car, I want to buy it. There's also the ethical appeal, right? Because Subaru, because it cites Motor Trend, and Motor Trend is a prestigious car magazine. So they're using Motor Trend's ethos or credibility to make us want to buy the Subaru as well. Plus, there's sort of an emotional appeal. So there's ethos, plus there's the emotional appeal. It's not quite as striking as the guy with the tumor on his neck, but if we like the outdoors and we like the mountains, maybe we want to be here. There's a pretty vista. So that might appeal to the right kind of outdoorsy sort of person who, has an emotional reaction to this place and can imagine themselves there and want to be there. And those are, primarily the types of people who buy Subarus, are more outdoorsy sort of people. So this one kind of has all three. So it's working pretty well. It might be really convincing for the right kind of person. So this is also kind of ethos too. If you do like the outdoors, then that lends the credibility to Subaru and makes you want to buy it. So, and actually a lot of Subaru's reputation is built on their sort of outdoorsy image, and they appeal with ethos to people who like the outdoors. So here's another one. Here's another smoking one. It's not quite as gross as the last one. It does have an emotional appeal with the black lung here, in the cigarette. Maybe that kind of is a little disgusting. But primarily this is logical appeal, right? It's telling us for every one cigarette you smoke, you lose 7 minutes off your life. Smoking can put you at risk of cancer of the throat, which we just saw, mouth, heart, lungs, lips, bladder, and in women, the cervix. Smoking increases your chances of getting a disease known as emphysema. None of the above are reversible. It is no joke. Smoking kills. So here we have several logical reasons. So this is kind of like a list of, this is why you don't want to smoke. This is a very logical ad. And it's a pretty strong argument. This is the kind of thing you'd see more in a written argument. It's not quite as effective for an advertisement as maybe the guy with the neck, because advertisements are a lot more immediate. A lot of people don't spend time sort of reading advertisements, so the logical appeal often gets lost in advertisements. But there's that one. Let's take a look at just a few more. So here's one from Coca-Cola. We've got a cute little sea turtle on here, and it's telling us 71% of the Earth's surface is ocean. Shouldn't 100% of it be clean? And there's that, again, that sea turtle, and this is actually really hard to read, but it talks about how Coca-Cola is donating some money to sea turtles to help save them. How does this make us want to buy Coca-Cola? Is it telling us logically that Coca-Cola is a good product, that it tastes good? It's not like the taste test. People prefer Coca-Cola over Pepsi, or however it was in the 80s they did that test. That would be a logical appeal. Here we don't have that. Is it emotional? Perhaps, maybe we care about sea turtles, that kind of evokes our sense of emotion. It's pulling on our sense of wanting to save the world and save the environment. So that could be emotional. But primarily what it's doing here is building ethos, right? So maybe we don't see Coca-Cola as that good of a company because they make sugary drinks that give people cavities. So Coca-Cola has an image issue, and they're kind of working on it with this ad. When they say they're going to donate money to sea turtles to save the sea turtles, we see them as credible and trustworthy. We say, oh, Coca-Cola is doing good things. That actually makes me want to buy a Coca-Cola product. So ethos is very powerful, right? And if a company can build up its ethos, you're likely to believe or buy anything they sell, which brings me to the last ad. This one is for Apple, which is one of the biggest companies in the world, and they have super strong ethos. People love Apple products. They trust in Apple completely, and whenever a new Apple product comes out, they want to buy it right away just because it's made by Apple. Now that is ethos. And how do you build that? Well, they did a lot of campaigning with it, and this was part of the campaign to help build their ethos, was by selling their image, right? Here we have this kind of dorky guy in the suit saying, I'm a PC, and here we have this cool-looking guy who's saying, I'm a Mac. Nothing logical in here about the speed of the computer, the processing power of the computer, the battery life, or anything like that. That would be logical appeal. We don't have anything like that. We don't even have pictures of computers in here or anything. It's a little bit of an emotional appeal, maybe because we don't want to be like this guy, and we do want to be like this guy, because he seems a lot more down to earth, a lot cooler. He probably has a cooler life. So that's ethos, you know. So once they're sort of saying Apple is cool, PC is not cool. If they can convince us that Apple's cool, and then we buy into the Apple line, the Apple product, they've built their ethos. We buy into them completely, and we want to be cool. We don't want to be like the PC guy. So there's a good example of super strong ethos, and this ad is really all about ethos. So there's some good examples of appeals and advertisements. So I think it's a nice way to sort of get a base for how do we look at the three appeals of argument. Okay, so let's wrap it up. When encountering argument, it's imperative, super important, that you evaluate them critically. In order to evaluate them critically, consider using Aristotle's three appeals of argument. Ask, how does the argument appeal to us logically? What's the thesis? What's the support? And what's the evidence? Ask, how does it appeal emotionally? How is it stirring my emotions or feelings? And is that an effective emotional appeal? Finally, consider the overall ethos or the ethical appeal. Is the author trustworthy or not trustworthy? So if you can do this, you can be a very discerning reader, and that will help to make you a very good evaluator of arguments. Good luck in all your evaluations, and take care. Bye.